In my business, social etiquette, business etiquette, dining is very important. Knowing which fork to use and when, how to drink wine, what wine glass to use, all of it is important. But I think in the end, what people remember is you and how you treated people.
Welcome back to the Assyrian podcast. We hope you've missed us just as much as we've missed you. My name is Odessa, and I am kicking off this season with episode 201. In today's episode, you'll hear from Lisa Mirza Grotts. She is a renowned etiquette consultant known as the Golden Rules Gal, based in California. As a certified etiquette professional, Lisa expertly blends traditional and modern manners into practical, everyday advice. With wedding season upon us, I thought it would be fitting to have Lisa provide some helpful tips, and she delivered. We discussed life growing up as an Assyrian, how the values learned from a young age have helped her navigate through life's intricacies, her journey to become an etiquette expert, and practical do's and don'ts for social events from weddings to housewarmings. Whether you are seeking online etiquette guidance or lifestyle etiquette tips, Lisa is an amazing resource to have. She recently completed a master course on dining etiquette available on her website, Lisa Grotts, that's GROTTS.com, and offers a Zoom with Lisa feature where you can submit an etiquette question and book a 5-minute video call slot with her. P.S. For those who've been with the podcast since the beginning, Lisa is the daughter of Jay Mirza, whom we've interviewed for our 3rd episode. We love hosting this podcast and are grateful to be back and sharing the stories of Assyrians worldwide who are making their mark on society. Help spread the word about us and enjoy this episode. Thank you so much, Lisa, for agreeing to be on the Assyrian podcast. We're so happy to have you.
It's my pleasure to be here.
Lisa, why don't we start off with a little bit about your personal background? Where were you born and raised? And talk to us about your life growing up.
So I was born in Turlock, California, at a hospital that no longer exists on Canal Drive. And I mean, as long as I can remember, I loved my Assyrian family in Turlock. But we had to move to Sacramento because my father was an architect and he couldn't make a living, I guess, in Turlock. I mean, this is what they told me, years later. But growing up in Sacramento, we went to Turlock every single weekend when I was a kid because my mother's family lived in Turlock and my father's family lived in Modesto. So we would tag team, back and forth. I kind of remember starting Fridays with my grandparents, William and Grace in Modesto, and then we would go to Turlock and with my mom's mom and her sisters and brother-in-law. So it was an idyllic upbringing. In fact, one of my Syrian cousins just posted on Facebook a picture of Hina's brother when they were young and said, I miss these days. And I thought, oh, so do I. It was just so wonderful and so fun. But anyhow, I was basically raised in Sacramento.
And for a point of reference, for those that may not be familiar with where Sacramento is in relation to Turlock, how far would you say the distance is?
Central Valley, Sacramento's the capital, probably 90 minutes. I mean, now probably a 2-hour drive, but 100 miles at best. So that's why we could make the distance so easily, the drive rather. And then you can take the train now. It's super, super easy for those that are listening that do not live in California. Anyway, I was raised in Sacramento and I lived there until I went to college. And I also went to college in the Central Valley at the University of the Pacific. But my parents had a lot of Assyrian friends. I mean, we called everyone a cousin, which I still do. And my friends who are not Assyrian, so many of them say, okay, mom, so this is your mom's sister or your dad's sister? Neither. They're just aunts and uncles, and it's just a sign of respect. And I think that's so funny. But, my more ethnic friends don't ask me, the Greeks, Italians, Armenians, they just go with it. But everyone else, oh, you look like your mom's sister. She's not even related. She's just a Syrian. And she was my mother's best friend. So I have a gaggle of these, I call it gaggle of aunts that are just everywhere, unrelated, but they are related. They've known me since I was a baby. And they were my mother's best friend. And she passed away many years ago. She passed away almost 22 years ago. And I know that you all recently interviewed my father, who's turning 90 in October, and he now lives in the Central Valley full time. My parents actually retired to Turlock, oh gosh, maybe 25 years ago when they retired. So it's fun to go because then I get to see everybody at the same time.
Absolutely. And I laugh when you talk about, having all of your parents' friends around you being referenced as aunts and uncles, because I grew up in the same way, and now we're raising our daughter to think that that is the same thing as well. And
It is.
it's
And when
almost kind of a sign of respect when
it
she's
is.
referencing one of our friends to call them like auntie or atu and then uncle.
Exactly. It's an honorific, but it's a sign of respect. And when I meet your daughter, she's going to call me the same, and I'm going to love it and, you know, accept it. I think it's wonderful. I mean, in my own business, I really credit my family. I mean, they gave me all the tools that I need to move through this life, and I just feel super fortunate to have had the upbringing that I did.
Now I know in Sacramento, at least currently, there is a smaller Assyrian community there, but I imagine when you grew up in Sacramento, were there many Assyrians?
Not that I knew of. I mean, we had a group that there were like 8 to 10 that we got together with all the time. But when I say we got together with Assyrians, usually they would come from the Bay Area, San Jose, or from Turlock, those that had already, retired, basically. We had a lot of company growing up.
Got it.
Huh.
So from like Monday through Friday, you
Normal
sort of
life.
lived like, yeah,
Yeah.
and then come the weekend,
Normal people.
you're
Then on
enamored
the
in
weekend,
Assyrian lifestyle.
that's right. I'm in the not the guest house. I'm in like the guest room, which, is like a bed, or I'm sleeping with my aunt in another room, and it was super fun. But here's what's really interesting. About 10 years ago, another TV, a Syrian station in San Jose interviewed my dad, and they did it in Burlingame at my sister's home. And then after the reporter said, I'd like to get your daughters on camera because there's two of us, me and my sister Allie. And we said, okay, sure. So she looked at us both and said, what was it like growing up in a Syrian family? And my sister was the first to answer. She's 7 years my junior, and she said, it was like I was foreign. And I did a double take and I said, I mean, I didn't say anything because she was talking and she said, I just didn't feel like we were American. I remember thinking, did we live in the same house? Because I loved growing up as I did, and it was so fun. But my mother said, was too Americanized. And I think what she meant by that is we were so many years apart. My
Hmm.
mother had two miscarriages in between me and my sister. And so for Allie, it was, hot dogs and American pie kind of thing. And for me, it was Assyrian food and relatives. And she just was so separate from that. And it's never changed. I mean, it just was a different upbringing. And after my dad was giggling, and I said, Allie, I didn't even know you felt this way. She said, oh, always. She said, I just wanted to go to someone's house and have tacos. And mom would say, why would you go there and have tacos when I'm making a lamb roast? And I'd say, what's wrong with you? Like I didn't get it. So it's funny how you can be raised in the same house, but feel completely different about your upbringing.
Absolutely. I can relate to that as well. You mentioned that you had gone to college at the University of Pacific. Talk to me a little bit about that. I'd love to learn about your journey through your education and how you essentially got into the world of etiquette.
Sure. Well, my paternal grandfather, William Mirza, he was, and my dad's family were born in Iran, in Tehran. And my grandfather, when he immigrated to this country, he really, did it so my dad and his brothers and sisters could have a better life. He wanted them to be educated. And so when we were born, I think they came over in the 50s. I was born in the 60s. He loved education. I mean, that was it for him. And so I showed an interest in music. And so my grandfather said, oh, how wonderful. Your father, my dad was in a men's choir in a boarding school in India. And so he bought me a piano, and I got really interested in playing the piano. And then it went on to voice, and I love music to this day. Music was my first love, classical music. So when I entered UOP, I was actually on scholarship in the Conservatory of Music. That's how it started. Of course, didn't end that way. But then after about a year, I was thinking, what am I going to do with my career? I mean, how am I going to make a living? 20 years old. I didn't see it happening. And now, of course, it's much, much different. I was on music board before COVID, and then I resigned during COVID, called the San Francisco Conservatory of Music. And now it's very different because you can get business degrees. You can work in so many aspects of music without playing an instrument. And my instrument was piano and voice. Anyway, so then I changed and I double majored in communications because talking is sort of a natural for me, and poli sci. I love politics, loved it. And so the etiquette portion really didn't happen for many, many years later. When I moved to San Francisco in 1984, it wasn't until, let's see, in 1991, is it 91? I can't remember. Maybe 95. There was a mayoral contest going on in San Francisco where Willie Brown was running for mayor, and I had a job and I was just laid off. And I remember sitting home in my condo. I remember it clearly. I was drinking Paul Newman lemonade and eating a tuna sandwich. That was always my go-to when I didn't have a good day, and thinking, here's my box of stuff for my office. Now what am I going to do? How am I going to pay my mortgage, etc. And the phone rang. And it was a San Francisco supervisor. And I had worked on the board of supervisors a few years before. And he said, I heard you just got laid off from your job. And I said, okay, I know San Francisco is a small town, but that's crazy. At the time, there were like 700,000 people. And he said, small town. I'm running Willie Brown's campaign for mayor. Why don't you come work for us? And that's really how it started, completely by happenstance. And I said, sure, what do I have to do? Show up to his law office tomorrow morning at 8. And that was sort of it. And then after I worked on his campaign, the mayor said to me, how do you feel about working? I'll never forget this, in the Department of Parking and Traffic. It's the acronym is DPT. And I said, I don't. I said, I get a lot of parking tickets. And I will be in the newspaper every day for the wrong reason. He's like, yeah, scratch that. And I said, I really would like to work in your protocol office. I really am good at putting on events and doing social things. And he said, okay, but there is a head of the office. You have to interview with her. And so that's how it started. And the chief of protocol for many years in San Francisco was Charlotte Maillard Schultz. And then I interviewed with her, and then I became her director of protocol for the city. And so that's really how it started. After 4 years, I went on my own and I went to Washington, D.C., and I became certified in a protocol school. And that's how it started. That was 25 years ago. And yes, so I became a certified etiquette and protocol expert. And that's a book and many clients later. And now, of course, life is so different post-COVID. I used to teach behavior classes in person to children, teens, and adults, and now I do it online. So it's a much different animal.
So many times when we're entering in higher education, we sometimes think that the pathway from the beginning to the end is something that is supposed to be really clear and really obvious to people. And I love hearing that what you enter in terms of the field or the major that you go into can result in many different opportunities that end up in an area that you might have not even considered or had thought of or knew even existed, 10 years to that, 5 years to that, wherever it was. So I love hearing that journey of how you got there, and that, there's a school of protocol and how exactly people go about doing that. So in terms of the realm of etiquette, why is etiquette important?
Well, as my tagline goes, you can have everything in the world, but what matters most is your behavior and how you treat other people. It's important because we have rules in life for everything. And I think now more than ever, kindness and compassion and civility is paramount. It is the most important thing. And it's funny because, yes, it was a very roundabout path for me, but really, I had many different jobs in San Francisco. I worked in retail. I worked for the San Francisco Giants. I've had so many different backgrounds that could definitely help doing what I do. But I think ultimately I'm in a business that is natural because I had all this growing up. During COVID, I was feeling a little bit stale. I felt like my business was stagnant. The beauty of having your own business, as you know, is it can morph into anything. And so I remember thinking, what am I going to do? I just don't feel like I'm reaching my stride. And through a mutual friend, she said, I know this woman who is a brander. And I'm like, what's a brander? Helping you brand your business. So I hired this woman. It was COVID. We had a class once a week together on the phone for 2 hours for 4 weeks. She gave me homework. And when it was all done, she said, Lisa, you're the easiest client I've ever had. I said, really? why? How come it's clear to you and not to me? She goes, it's your family. You talk about your family every time we had an assignment and everything you do. It is all, you do what you do because of them. And I thought, of course I do. I just never, kind of put the dots together from entertaining, when you're little and the relatives came over, your mom would say, make sure they're all taken care of. Take their coats, make sure they have enough food, so it was not a formal training, but I can remember well into my 30s, my mother saying to me, Lisa, did you send so and so a condolence note? Did you, Mom? I got it now. Okay, I know what I'm doing. And I love what I do, and I love helping people, and kindness is key. I mean, I have to say, I was filming some online etiquette videos yesterday, some master classes that I'm starting, and my videographer was talking to me about how some of his clients were mean. And I said, mean? How could they be mean? This is exciting what you're doing. He said, I know. And I said, it's much easier to be nice than not nice. He said, I agree. I mean, what you carry with you when you're not kind to someone doesn't feel good. I mean, I don't know about you, but when I have a bad day and I, bark at someone and I feel horrible about it, think, oh, that is just not right. And so in my business, social etiquette, business etiquette, dining is very important. Knowing which fork to use and when, how to drink wine, what wine glass to use, all of it is important. But I think in the end, what people remember is you and how you treated people. We just had a dinner party. We do very small parties now since COVID. And we had an issue with one of our toilets in the bathroom, of all things. And the guest came up to me and said something in my ear, and he was kind of embarrassed about it. And I just thought, we're going to just make this easy. I said, everybody, the electricity's out in this part of the house. I just made up a story. I said, bathroom down the hall works. And I just closed the door. Just like to leave him intact, feeling good. It's all about how you make other people feel. And in the end, that is what is most important. And I
Oh, I
certainly
love
feeling growing up, with my relatives. I love them so much. I still do. And I think that's why I love Turlock so much still. I go any chance I can get, and I love being around all my relatives, and they're all late 80s, 90s now, and they're not going to be around forever. But that's really, where I got all my nurturing and my compassion.
I'd love to learn from your observance in growing up as an Assyrian, holding that as like a tool in addition to the schooling that you've done and the work experiences that you've had. Like, what are there any etiquettes that you've seen that are very unique to Assyrians and Assyrian households?
Well, I can tell you this, all of my friends growing up, since I was the only Assyrian around, still remember my house, our house, as being ground zero for everything.
Mm.
This is the house we went to. It was always at Lisa's house. Her parents were always entertaining. So I think it has to do more with entertaining with the Syrians more than anything. We always had a house full. Everybody was welcomed. We had food that no one else ate in the neighborhood. And they love that. So, I mean, I wouldn't even say the word etiquette. I don't think you need to use the word etiquette. I just think, like family values. It was just all about the family, and just having, if we didn't have family on Thanksgiving, anyone who didn't have a home to go to, they always came to our house. Someone was always welcome at our house. And I think that's why we call everybody aunt and uncle when they're not related. It's just like you say, it's a sign of respect, and you just don't leave people out in the lurch. And we're that way too. My husband and I, the same thing. He's so far from Assyrian, but he thinks he's Assyrian because he's married to me.
I love that. I think that that definitely holds true. And I remember growing up, friends saying similar things, or partners of those who are Assyrians saying similar things, that one of the traits about Assyrians that they love is that component of it, that they always feel hospitable when they and warm and welcome when they enter into an Assyrian household, which
Oh,
warms my heart. I love to hear that. And um,
except no one could ever pronounce Assyrian. It was my Italian friend Joyce would say, how's your Assyrian family? Just to tease me. I'm like, very funny. How's your Italian family? She'd go, good. Thank you. Like, do you say Assyrian? Do you say Assyrian? We're not Syrian. We're Christian, not Muslim. I mean, to this day, everyone like clumps it all together, and it's not easy to understand how it all works, but at least we understand it.
we understand it. And even though they may not understand who Assyrians are, I think through you and through your family, they have certain ideas of who Assyrians are. And I can guess that they're probably taken in a positive light.
Let's hope
That's
so.
great. Yeah. I want to say so living in a country, let's say like the United States or any of these Western countries with a lot of cultural diversity, how would one navigate differences when it comes to etiquette? So, for example, like I think of my Assyrian American background, and sometimes I feel like I am navigating two different worlds. I think Assyrians have very distinct things about what we do and how we do it. But then there's also this kind of like larger American focus and an approach. And so how does one kind of navigate both of those realms with grace?
Great question. So you're familiar with the when in Rome adage, like when in Rome, you kind of do as the other people do. So we're here in the United States of America. I do teach international protocol, but only for certain countries. I can do, China, Japan. It's very different internationally. And I wouldn't even call it there an Assyrian etiquette because, our country is a little bit different than most or was. So this is one of the things my grandfather was always really, drilling into our heads that Lisa, you're an American first. Yes, you're a Syrian American, but you live in America, so you do as their ways. And I understand that. And so when people ask me where I'm from, I say, oh, my family is Assyrian, which, was between the Tigris and the Euphrates, and we kind of go way back. So it's great that Assyrians have their own traditions because, we know they're a little different for weddings and showers and how you give. And I think that's absolutely fine. But I'll just give you an example. When we got married, my husband and I, we got married in San Francisco, but 90% of the family came from Turlock. And you know how you give the sabachta, the money
Mhm.
when someone gets married. Well, in American weddings, they don't do that. No one gives money. They're like, money? What's a money box? And I said, well, it's a little different. You don't have to do it. And so we had a box because we had a lot of our own friends who didn't understand that, who sent gifts or delivered gifts. So those are the kind of nuances that other people don't know. And it's fine, but it's also fine to do it. It's not like it's wrong to have an aunt have a shower for you. They're just different. And this is one of the things I'd like to do in the future more is kind of work with Assyrian children and young adults and train them and just not for profit, just to, be a mentor, so to speak, because I think the ones that are really raised with parents from the old country, it's hard for them. And then they live here now. Parents are used to their ways. Kids are in this country and it is a struggle. And it shouldn't be, I mean, the good news is we have those basic components of, the hospitality and, how to entertain and a loving, kind family. A lot of families don't have that. And so I look at it as an advantage. But to your exact question, I think it really is specific to what you're talking about. Like, okay, if I'm going to this party, I have a question of, how to dress. I might dress this way at an Assyrian home. My husband always says, you don't need to wear all your gold. I said, what are you talking about? Listen, whenever we go to events, Assyrian women like wear all their gold from their jewelry box. You live in America. And I laugh. And I said, well, can I wear my gold earrings this morning for my great grandmother? Yes, but you don't need a necklace and a bracelet. Okay. And he's like, Lisa, I've seen the parties. They wear everything at the same time. I said, okay, but that's cultural. It is cultural. And it's the same when I go to Armenian events or Greek or Italian, and it's fun, so it's too bad this isn't a visual interview because I did earrings from my great grandmother. They're coins from Persia.
Oh my goodness. Amazing.
Yes, they were gifted to me actually from my Aunt Sonia, my dad's sister. They were her mothers and my grandmothers or my great grandmothers. So it's just things like that, there. So that's why I have a Zoom with Lisa, not that I'm trying to sell it, but I have where you can buy, like 5 minutes of my time and ask me questions such as this. So because people think often want to do the right thing, and that's where I come in. I want, it's no different than studying for an exam. When you go to take an exam, if you know the answers, you're confident. But if you go in there unprepared, you're going to flunk. And no one wants to flunk out in life. We all want to be successful. And I want to see future generations of these Middle Eastern kids coming up have the skills and the confidence to not only survive, but thrive.
Absolutely. So if I heard you correctly, it's navigating the realms depends on the circumstance or the context that you're in. If you're in with
Right.
Assyrian functions, then you do as the
Do like a
Assyrians do. When you're in an American function, you generally do as the Americans do. Maybe you don't have to dress to a T and all your gold and all of that, but something nice on will do.
I have a good friend who's Persian and she's a dress designer, and everything she did had a little extra frill on it. Very Persian. And I'd say, Lily, you got to tone it down for me. Why? You're missing. No, I don't want that. Take that away. Let's just make it a little simpler. So, I've lived here a long time. I'm in my sixth decade. So I kind of do as everyone else does. And but at an Assyrian party, sure, I'd add it back on and I'd just fit right in perfectly.
Two questions for you before we start to go into specifics when it comes to like wedding season, all of that. One, how does etiquette change through time? How have you navigated etiquette as things just naturally change in society, how people dress, how people behave, how people approach any circumstance?
Well, that's for sure. I mean, I've seen it up close and personal when I worked for Willie Brown when he was the mayor. Remember Casual Fridays when that started? I don't remember exactly how it started, but it was this just around the globe. Oh, we can all wear jeans on Fridays. Well, it wasn't exactly that, but I worked for a person who was very formal and he wouldn't allow us to wear jeans. And then he got a lot of kickback from a lot of companies because in San Francisco, we're home, of course, to Levi Strauss and the Gap, and they invented, khakis and jeans. And so we have to evolve and change. But now, especially in California, it's much different. I think the West Coast is so much different than the East Coast. We're way more casual here. So dress is one area that I think we've really become a little too casual. And then came COVID and forget it. People don't even work, they wear their pajamas. And, that's fine too. That was fun for a while to work in bed for a year. I was always in my pajamas and I taught my dad how to FaceTime during COVID because we never FaceTime. We always saw each other. And he'd say the same thing every time we talked. Are you still in your pajamas? My dad's old school, as in get up, get dressed, shower, go to your desk and work. And I go, Dad, why? I mean, what's the deal? He goes, it's 1 o'clock. So what? I put on a clean pair at noon. It's fine. So that's one aspect. But I think what has really evolved is the way in which we communicate. Socialization as we knew it, I wouldn't say dead, but I think COVID was a game changer in so many ways. Overnight, we saw a handshake become a weapon. Being too close to someone was not good, which is really not good for interpersonal communication. And the iPhone, or the telephone or mobile phone. I often wonder if Steve Jobs, God rest his soul, knows what he created. I mean, at the time, it is a great tool, but at the same time, I feel that people just don't talk anymore. They text. It's easier to not call someone. It's easier just to send a text and that's not good for society. I don't think it's good. I don't think these kids in this day and age, the millennials or even a little bit older, realize how wonderful it was to be able to go into an office and socialize with people and have lunch and go have a drink after work. And that's how you met your friends. And now they sit at home all day or in coffee shops. So I think communication is a huge change for the world.
And how do you advise on something like that? Like meeting people where they're at versus where you believe they should be. So let's say to take for communication, for example, the way that people are communicating currently versus this like ideal approach to it and how to, I guess, navigate both of those.
Well, I think you have to know your audience. If I don't text my niece or nephew, I'm not going to hear back from them because they're young, 20s, early 20s. But we always tell them, you guys, you need to call Poppy, my dad. So I would never I would text my dad when I'm flying somewhere, Dad landed, just so he knows. Or I'm on my way to Turlock, I'll be there. My ETA is this. But I call people that are older because that's what they're used to. So you have to just know your audience. It's really about that. For younger people, when I say younger, it's really up to the parents to control this with the iPhones and the whatnot. But, to make an effort to get together with people, I don't know that it's different. I don't even know if I have the answer to that. I don't think so. I think that is a by basis, but as companies go back to work more and more, hopefully we'll get back into the swing a little, even if they go back 3 days a week. It's better than 5 days at home. And I think years from now, where the sociologists are going to have a heyday as to how different our culture is. And, my husband, as an example, is in sales. And he said, it's tough now to hire these kids because
Mm.
they don't have a personality because they don't talk to anyone. And I said, I know it's different, huh? And he goes, yeah, and they don't want to come in. You have to see people when you're in sales. You have to have the gift of gab, and you don't have that unless you practice it. You see people on a daily basis. And so that is going to be tough moving forward.
Last question before we get into events. How do you approach a situation or advise on something where there's little to no point of reference? Let's say somebody is asking you, what would you do in this situation? Assuming that you hadn't, in your experience or schooling, had gone through that type of question or situation, how do you generally provide guidance to
Right.
something that
Well, I don't know everything, of course. And, you should see my reference library. It's enormous.
oh, nice.
Of course, we have Google and we have Chat GPT that can help us. But my frame of reference is always common sense and kindness. So even if I don't know exact, there's an answer for everything. And it's, usually leans towards that direction. Even though someone may not understand something specifically, it's hard for me to know without like a specific question. And if I don't know the answer, I'm gonna, tell someone. But usually, we try to use common sense. Now, as I've learned, not everybody has common sense or they didn't grow up with it. And so that's hard too. So I try to kind of bring it back down to basics, kind of, the ABCs and say, okay, let's start here from the beginning. A common question I have all the time is how to make small talk conversation. And of course, this is so easy for us because we grew up with like a million people, right? It's not so easy for everyone. But I think I always give examples for people like, okay, this is how you do it. You stay away from talking about health or politics. Then you talk about maybe a family member in common. What's the latest movie out? Easy things like, oh, have you been to the new restaurant? What sports team is winning in baseball? So it's always about a connection with somebody, and you connect with that link. And so there's always a way to do it. It's actually very easy.
I know a lot of people don't enjoy small talk, but I always say you have to have small talk to eventually lead to deeper conversations with people. You're not going to just delve into seeing
Right.
someone and saying, "What is your life perspective since COVID has happened?" It's like it takes a second for somebody to think about
Oh
that,
yeah,
right?
give me two martinis. Like, come on,
Yeah.
that's crazy.
So you need a little bit of small talk and genuinely being curious about the other person to start to ask those smaller questions that build up to bigger and bigger conversations and deeper conversations to have with that person.
You just said it. You could work for me. Being curious and asking another person about themselves. People like to talk about themselves. You may not want to talk about yourself, but it's not about you when you're talking with someone else. So it's always good to ask somebody questions and then open-ended, not just like, how was your summer? Fine. Did you go anywhere interesting this summer? And then let them say, oh, yes, I went to Turlock this summer. I went to Tuscany. And then, oh, I just came back from Tuscany. I had a friend that went to Tuscany. It's a link, it's a connection, as you say, that could take you to that next level of conversation.
Absolutely. So we are slowly heading into the realm of wedding season. It's good weather for those of us on this hemisphere. And with that comes, showers of sorts, weddings, engagements, all of these joyous occasions. And definitely that one of the more unique things about us is the way that we do weddings. I always hear that from those of my friends who aren't Assyrian. They're like, I love Assyrian weddings. I love the music. I love the handkerchiefs that you guys throw in the air and the way that everybody dresses. But let's talk about majority of our audience base are Assyrians. When we talk about showers, weddings, can you go over some of the things that are what would be kind of protocol and etiquette when it comes to tardiness or being on time? I know that there's some stereotypes that we just ingrain within ourselves, one being that where it's like, oh, Assyrians are always going to be late. But what would be the right approach to approach any of these events that have a time that people would like their guests to be there for?
Assyrians are always late. I don't know why. I don't know. I've tried to figure it out. I've asked so many people. You can't be an hour late to someone's wedding because it's going to happen without you. And that is rude. And I am the golden rules gal. The golden rule is biblical. You treat other people the way you want to be treated. That's where I start the basis of everything. So if you're getting married, wouldn't you want me to be on time to your wedding? Because I'd certainly want you to be on time to my wedding, that kind of thing. I mean, when I was young, I remember, you know how Assyrian weddings, I don't know if they still do this, but the wedding was always like at 4 or 4:30. I mean, this is like early, I'm probably a lot older than you, or early childhood memory. And then like 4 hours later, they would have the reception. But sometimes my parents didn't even go to the wedding. I'm like, well, I don't understand. You know, like, I watch Disney movies. You go to the wedding. And oh yeah, we couldn't make the wedding. Oh, I just never understood that. That is
Oh, as in
so
the ceremony itself.
the ceremony. Like,
Mhm.
what is with that? You have to go to the ceremony. So if we're talking to the Assyrian tribe right now, you're gonna have to get your act together. Get dressed on time and go see the ceremony, please. I mean, the reception maybe you can be a little late for if there's cocktails, but yes, so you want to try to be on time. And the other thing is to RSVP, to respond to invitations in a timely manner. And what's really important, not only for showers, weddings, is even respond if you can't attend. Just because someone sends you an invite and you can't go, sometimes people need to have an answer, for caterers or for seating, how many people are going to attend. So if you can't make it, you still need to call, email, whatever they've asked you on the invitation to do, to let the party know that you will be a yay or a nay. If it says no gifts, then it means no gifts. And I think for a lot of people get confused over gifts versus hostess gifts. Now, for a wedding and a shower, you're going to bring a gift, or the proper way in America is to send the gift. And we send it because you don't want to have the bride and groom have to take home a gift at the wedding. It's just harder for them. So you ship it ahead of time. Money, you're not going to ship. Of course, you got the money box, you're going to go for that. But for a shower, you definitely bring the gift with you, just like most showers. Some now I'm hearing the trend that people aren't even opening their shower gifts, which I think is just sad. I mean, that's part of the fun for a baby shower, a wedding shower. Oh, to see what you're going to get to start your life off together. Let's see, what other rules? So RSVP, of course, thank you notes. Thank you notes. I'm a thank you note snob. I'm not a snob about clothes. I'm a TJ Maxx. I'm a Maxxinista. I love Marshalls. I love all those stores. But when it comes to thanking someone for something, it takes 3 minutes to write 3 lines, put a stamp on it, and send it in the mail. That is key. What happens if you live far away, that person? You can send an email, of course, or a Christmas card. They live in another country. Send an email, but don't forget to thank people for their kindnesses.
So be on time, RSVP whether you can or can't go.
Bring a gift
Gifts
or
if you're
send it.
gonna send it. If you bring a gift, which Assyrians usually, give money for wedding gifts, how much should a guest put?
You
I
know,
often get that as a
yeah,
question that people
yeah.
ask because they never know.
I had one yesterday. She's a Syrian, but she was going to an American, like her neighbor's wedding. And that's a tough one. I said, if she's a close friend, I would $200. I mean, typically in Assyrian weddings, you give kind of to make up the cost of the dinner that the parents would spend, the mother or the father or the bride, to kind of recoup their money and then hopefully have extra. But I think it depends where the wedding is. Now, a wedding in San Francisco, you probably have to give 500, but no one's going to do that. So I think 200 is a generous amount for a gift. But, again, it's just a general number.
I know
Gosh.
oftentimes I have many friends who have been bridesmaids and groomsmen for multiple weddings. And is there ever a time that it's okay to decline to be a bridesmaid or groomsman?
Most definitely. I'm quoted by Brides Magazine about this all the time. The cost of a wedding for a bridesmaid, for an attendant, is astronomical, because especially like say you live in Chicago and the wedding's in California, then you got to pay for your flight, the bridesmaid dress, a gift, bachelor party, bachelorette party, etc. So there are lots of things that could preclude you, such as you just don't have enough cash, you're in between jobs, you're strapped. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with saying, you know what, I know we're good friends, I just can't make it work. But be upfront from the get-go. So the bride and groom to be can, ask other people and have enough time. And that's not that you're going to not make an effort to get there, but that could be your gift, just showing up to the wedding. Now, some people are more fortunate than others, and they can maybe afford to underwrite your dress or the hair, makeup, whatever, you have done, and that's a different story. But I think this is a common problem because you're in your 20s, you don't have a lot of money. I mean, you're just starting out, you're working. I remember being in so many weddings when I was in my 20s. I was broke, and it was like finally I just had to, and I got married in my 30s where most of my friends were married. So I was in a lot of weddings. And I mean, luckily none were international. That's a whole other subject, having a destination wedding. Well, that they're just, cost prohibitive.
Let's talk about now when it comes to housewarming or being a guest at someone's house. Do you bring something with you? And if so, what do you bring?
Yes, this is what Assyrians excel in, hospitality, right? So you always bring a hostess gift when you're staying at somebody's house, always, because that is your way of saying thank you to them. Now, you come to my house, you bring me, I don't know, you bring me walnuts and raisins or something. I don't need to send you a thank you note back. Okay, just to be clear, because I get this question a lot. I am the host, so that is your thank you gift to me. I don't have to send you a note. But you definitely have to send me a thank you note for staying for the weekend or hosting a dinner or whatever. Now, let's be clear. Are you talking weekend specifically or just a dinner?
Let's do both.
Okay, so if you're going to an Assyrian's house for dinner, you're not going to send a thank you note each time because these are people you're going to see all the time. That's totally different. And again, your thank you would be whatever you bring, but you can still call the next day or send an email. But when you're a weekend guest, without a doubt, you need to send a note. I think the best guests always call or email and then send a note. But again, it just takes a few minutes of your time to say thank you because you really are going over and above as a weekend. When you're a host, you're going to have sheets and towels and you're going to be cooking, even if you go out for a meal or two. So you always take something to them. And I always think the best kind of gifts are the homemade ones, preserves. What else? I mean, if you make wine, I don't know, in the wine country where I live, people usually take wine, but my husband, he's so Assyrian now, we even make tortilla and he makes it, but I grow it. So we do Jerusalem artichokes, which are my
Oh,
favorite,
the best
right?
tortilla.
Because they're crunchy. And I couldn't find a plant anywhere or a seed. I had to trade a farmer in town for like, I'll trade you some of my peaches. My dad's like, oh my gosh, who kidnapped my daughter? And I said, I know. I used to be a city girl. Now I'm a country girl. And now we make Jerusalem artichoke tortilla. Great gift. People are like, what are these? No, they're not ginger. You can actually eat it and chew it. But those are great gifts. Anything homemade that people make, people love that. If there's small kids in the family, I think it's fun to get a gift for the children, something that the whole family can enjoy, a book, a game, if they have a pool, summer toys. We were in Hawaii in January and we were invited to a party. And there was a 5-year-old there. And I said, what am I going to get her? And I went to a gift store and it was perfect. It was a little like coloring kit for the water of all the like the mammals in the water. Cute. See, something that kind of would pertain to the event. So I don't think Assyrians are short on gift giving. In fact, I think they give maybe not too much, but they go overboard.
Yes, we're very giving.
Right.
Shoes on or off when entering a home? How do you know?
Oh, certain cultures in Japan and Hawaii, shoes are off. I mean, that's just a given, but it depends on the family. So if you go to the front door and you see 10 pairs of slippers outside, that's probably a good sign for you to take your shoes off, even if they haven't asked you. But I think that's just a personal thing. If someone asks you, you do as they say. It's their home. You do what they want you to do.
Sure. So you observe it, see it if it isn't already something that's explicitly
Right.
mentioned.
And if they say it, great. And you didn't get the hint at the front door, the nonverbal, okay, all of our shoes are sitting out here. I just had a pedicure. I don't want to take my shoes off. Too bad. That's just the rule in this family. So it's not that big a deal.
Okay.
It's just respect, disrespect, as you were saying earlier.
Funerals, like when you're a part of such a big Assyrian community, we can talk about the community, general community at large, but Assyrian communities, because you know so many people, there's also funerals are also like a very personal thing because we know so many people. And so when you hear someone passes or someone's parent who passes, it's personal. You talk about a story on your website of paying respect to the family of a childhood friend after a tragedy that happened to them and what your mom said to you. Could you tell us about that story and the lesson taken?
Sure. In fact, it's in my biography. Thank you for bringing that up on my website because it was about empathy. There was a girl, Elaine Jugum, in my middle school, and there was an ice cream parlor that we all used to hang out in Sacramento called Farrell's Ice Cream. I don't think they exist anymore, but there was an air show this particular day, and she was there with her father and I think some of her cousins in a plane crash, and they were killed. I think we were in the fifth grade, and I remember the next morning my mother coming in to the bathroom. I was taking a shower and she said, "Did you know this girl in your class, Elaine?" And I said, "Yes." And she told me the story. And, when you're that age, it's hard to even comprehend death. So I remember later that week, my mother said she got a cake or something, and we took it over to Elaine's mother's house. And I said, "Do I have to go? I don't want to go." And she said, "Lisa, yes, this is what you do when someone dies. You have to pay your respects to them. You have to be kind." Now, this woman, she lost her husband and her daughter. So now she had nobody in her family. But what I remember specifically is my mom, I overheard her say she was talking to some of the women in the neighborhood, some of the moms, and they didn't know what to do. And they didn't go over to her house. And I remember my mom saying to my dad, in Assyrian, because I don't speak Assyrian, but I understand a lot of it. "I can't believe these women like wouldn't go over and pay their respects to her." So I think I learned at a very young age what it's like to be empathetic and how important it is to see the world through other people. We live in a me society now, not a we society. It's all about me, and we have to change that mindset. It's just way overboard. We live in community, and that's one of the great things about being Assyrian is it is about we. And so when there are affairs and people come together, everyone helps out, no matter where you are. And I think that is so missing in certain cultures, but we can't change that. That's just, the way that is. So it was a great lesson for me. And it's something I never forgot. I don't know, maybe because my maternal grandmother, Julia, she had my mother when she was in her 40s. This was unusual. And so when my mom was born, her sisters were all in her 20s. When I came, all my aunts were much older. So I was raised around older people. So I felt like I went to a lot of funerals when I was younger, where most kids probably do not. So death is a hard message for a lot of people because they don't know how to deal with people. It's a personal thing. Some people are so uncomfortable about saying, "I am so sorry for your loss." They don't know what to do. But I think that's the first message is you just put it out there. "I am so sorry for your loss." Whether you put it in a card in person, take a casserole, take Syrian rice, whatever you do, you just have to let the other person know you're thinking about them. And I think that's, really important. And I mean, it was horrible that this happened to this friend of mine from school so young, but it was so wonderful that my mother kind of marched over there but it was a horrible day. I remember sitting there in the chair and the mother was crying and she was smoking. And, I mean, it was like, I don't want to see this, but you know what? There are a lot of things in life that aren't pleasant that we have to deal with, and death is one of them.
What struck me about that story is that your mom mentioning to you that you must do what you don't want to do. Like we
Right. Have to do
sometimes
the
do things that might not be comfortable to us and might not be ideal for us, but we do them anyway because they're the right thing to do. And that's something I think as a first generation Assyrian growing up, when I look at those that are elderly, I see them go and navigate all of these circumstances and it seems so natural to them. And when it comes to that, if that type of event happens and I have to approach it, sometimes it isn't always natural of how exactly to approach it. But I always think about them in the way that they would. Plus, my mom, my mom will call me anyway to be like, "Did you call so and so to make sure that gave your condolences?" And sometimes I don't want to do it because I haven't talked to that person in forever. Maybe they don't remember me. Maybe they hadn't done it for when somebody passed in my family. But I always think like what your mom said, that like you have to do some things that you don't always want to do, might not always be comfortable in doing, but you do it anyway. The way that you approach something isn't based off of the way that the other person would do it. It's just if you
Right.
know that something's the right thing to do, you do it anyway.
You don't even think about it. But of course, your mom, Assyrian moms, is you have that's the right thing to do. And it's funny you should say that because I remember when my mom died almost 22 years ago, some of the people that I was closest to didn't respond in the way that I expected them to. And it was expectation. And other people did that I wasn't even very close to. And I remember two in particular calling me, and I didn't even know them very well. And I just sat there on the phone and sobbed. And I thought, this is so wonderful. I mean, that they would just take the time to do this. But my uncle, who was a missionary, said the same thing to me when his wife died of, dementia. And here he is, like practically a priest saying, I'm so surprised. One of our good friends. And my dad said the same thing when my mom died. I can't believe I didn't hear from this cousin. And I said, Dad, everybody deals with death in different ways. Yes, these people reached out, definitely, but just not in the exact way that we wanted them to. So I think you got to think about that too. You're going to reach out, but in the way that you feel comfortable.
Wonderful. Well, Lisa, usually we end every episode by asking the guests if you had one thing to say to Assyrians who are listening from all over the world, what would you say?
Oh, I wish I could see you up close and personal. And I have to say that I feel this kinship more so now than I ever did to my heritage. And it's because of my parents, without question. A few years ago, I went to Jerusalem on a pilgrimage with the Episcopal Church, and I met a lot of Assyrians, and they were so wonderful and so welcoming in Jerusalem, in Bethlehem. And to this day, I laugh because at my hotel in Jerusalem, all the kids that worked for breakfast were Assyrian. And one of them came up to me and said, I'm going to show you. I have the prayer in Aramaic on a tattoo on my back, but I can't show you now, obviously, because you'd have to look at the dress. I go, oh, for sure. And then every morning, these pilgrims that I was with would say, can we ask you, how can you get your espresso first in the morning? And I said, do I? Yeah, we're all waiting for coffee and they're waiting on you hand and foot. And I said, oh, it's because they're Assyrian and they're just taking care of me. And then just a cute wrap up. When I was checking out of the hotel, I had a night flight and I said to the two women at the front desk, ladies, is there any way I can have a late checkout? And they said, yeah, till like 2. And I said, no, till like midnight. No, they said, you got to pay for another night. I said, oh, I was afraid of that. And then one of the boys from the kitchen came out and in Assyrian, he says to her, she's Sureta. And they said, you're Assyrian? I said, yeah. They go, oh, here's a key. Just keep it as long as you So we have a brotherhood, a sisterhood, and it was very funny. And all my friends loved that story. They said, of course, they were all Assyrians. So just continue being kind and generous. If our world would be a much better place, etiquette wise, if we all just took care of one another. And Assyrians have a great way of doing that. But if you have any questions, you can always email me or Zoom with me, and I can answer them for you.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and we'll be back in a couple of weeks.